Welcome to this bite-sized session on Year 2 Occupational Specialism Assessment for Assisting Healthcare Science. We'll walk through the examiner feedback from Summer 25, highlighting strengths, common pitfalls and strategies you can apply in delivery. So in today's session, we're going to focus on the key findings from both the examiner and moderator reports for healthcare science. We'll start by examining these findings in detail before moving on to identify the strengths, weaknesses and common trends we've seen across assignments. From there, we'll drill down to task level performance, looking at where learners did well and where they struggled. We'll then apply this insight to explore teaching and learning strategies that can strengthen delivery and ensure learners are assessment ready. And finally, we'll consider how all of this supports learner progression and achievement, making sure our teaching not only prepares students for assessment, but also equips them with the skills and confidence needed for their future roles in healthcare science. In the following analysis, you will see RAG rating. RAG shows where performance sits by task. Green means strengths, the examiner sees repeatedly. Amber means the work is partial, meets the brief but lacks justification or evidence. And red marks recurring weaknesses. We code the examiner's comments and normalise each bar to 100% so sections are comparable. Don't read it as marks, use it as a roadmap. Shrink ambers with quick wins, reduce reds, and rerun your own RAG after changes to check you're moving colours from amber and red to green. So let's now look more closely at Assignment 1 for Healthcare Science and how learners performed across the 4 tasks. So Assignment 1 is 3 core physiological measurements. Learners must carry them out safely and accurately, communicate throughout, and record results appropriately, applying hygiene or PPE and adapting to patient context. Overall, procedural competence is strong. Most candidates complete the test confidently and reach at least pass, many at distinction level. We also see an improvement on last year in basic communication and hygiene routines. The weak spots are consistency and contextualization. Some learners don't fully reassure or adapt language to patient needs, and there are occasional hygiene lapses, especially around setup, clean down and glove changes. Consideration of wider patient context is limited. So let's explore the assignment in a little bit more detail for the last series. For pulse oximetry, we're looking for correct probe placement, awareness of artifacts and perfusion, and a clear verbalized reading. For blood pressure, the key is cuff size, position, arrest period, repeat if anomalous, and a recorded range. For spirometry, apply acceptability criteria, best of 3, correct posture, and instruction. Note any indications and dispose or clean safely. So Assignment 1 requires students to carry out pulse oximetry, blood pressure and spirometry tests. The overall picture is positive. Most students performed the test competently, showing confidence and familiarity with procedures. Minor mistakes were rare and almost everyone achieved at least a pass, with a higher proportion reaching distinction level than in previous series. Communication and infection control have improved compared with last year. However, both remain inconsistent. Some students still don't explain procedures clearly enough or fail to ensure the patient was fully comfortable. Similarly, hygiene was sometimes overlooked, particularly in equipment setup or during transitions between tasks. The biggest area of weakness was contextualization. Many students didn't take account of patient-related factors such as additional needs or support requirements. This limited their ability to show a higher level application. So the RAG shows green for procedural competence, amber for communication and hygiene, and red for patient context and adaptation. The teaching priority is to embed not just the technical skills, but also the patient-focused adjustments that move competence into excellence. To strengthen performance in Assignment 1, we can adapt several targeted teaching strategies. First, labelling drills using simulated samples will help learners build accuracy and consistency. This provides a safe way to practice handling identification before they move into live assessments. Secondly, using exemplar records for peer review allows students to see what good documentation looks like and to critically evaluate each other's work. This encourages both accuracy and accountability in record keeping. Third, escalation flowcharts and role-play scenarios should be integrated into teaching. These provide learners with clear step-by-step pathways and chance to rehearse escalation protocols in a realistic but supportive environment. Fourthly, we need to emphasise accuracy over speed. While efficiency is important in practice, learners must first demonstrate safe, accurate and reliable processes. By prioritising precision, we ensure they build the right habits before increasing pace. Finally, patient role-play with feedback on tone and reassurance. This would give learners the chance to practice adapting their language, body language and tone in different patient contexts, with peer tutors giving structured feedback. Let's now look more closely at Assignment 2 for Healthcare Science and how learners performed across the 4 tasks. So Assignment 2 combines midstream urine or MSU collection and dipstick with a blood glucose test, plus correct sample preparation and documentation or LIMS. Comfort, hygiene, sequencing and clarity all matters. So procedures are generally well executed. Confident handling of kits, meters and sample prep and documentation are mostly accurate when prompted. Marks are higher when learners verbalise steps and check comfort or consent. Hygiene PPE remains inconsistent. Eye protection on dipsticks, surface cleaned down and timely glove changes. Some explanations remain generic or rushed and we still see occasional sequencing slip or incomplete notes. So let's look at this in more detail. So for MSU and dipstick, confirm identity and expiry, collect correctly, read at the manufacturer's times, record accurately and dispose safely. For blood glucose, prepare the site, follow meter or QC per SOP and record with units and clinical context and escalate abnormal results. For sample prep or documents, ensure correct labelling, forms, LIMS completion and packaging or transport per SOP. So let's explore how our students did in a bit more detail. So Assignment 2, as mentioned, focused on those 2 procedures and associated documentation. So the rag shows strong green for the practical element, with ambers where communication and hygiene wasn't consistent. So in regards to the urine and glucose, performed well overall. Learners generally followed the correct sequence, handled equipment confidently and met the PASS standard. Only small slips were seen. For patient communication, marks were higher when learners verbalised each step, checked privacy or comfort and confirmed consent. Lower scripts relied on generic phrases or rushed explanations. For hygiene and PPE, most applied the basics, but we still saw inconsistent eyewear for dipsticks, variable glove changes and occasional weak clean down. For sample prep and documentation, preparing the sample for microbiology and recording ID and LIMS details were usually accurate. A handful missed an entry or left notes incomplete. What to tighten? A simple safety cleanliness checklist taped to the bench, a talk-through script to standardise phrasing and pacing, and a docu-check step before learners finish. So address the challenges we saw in Assignment 2, we need to embed targeted teaching strategies that build both technical accuracy and critical thinking. First, learners need structured support in developing risk assessments. Using clear templates combined with scenario-based practice will help them learn how to identify hazards, apply control measures and make their assessments more robust. Second, structured data interpretation exercises will encourage learners to move beyond surface level conclusion. By practicing with different data sets and being asked to explain patterns and trends and anomalies, learners can develop stronger justification for their interpretations. Third, reflective writing can be scaffolded using the simple but effective prompts. What? So what? Now what? This helps learners move beyond description and into meaningful analysis and action planning. Fourthly, peer discussions can push learners to articulate their reasoning, challenging each other's ideas and move the reflections away from purely descriptive accounts. This kind of dialogue promotes depth, independence and professional insight. Finally, think aloud protocols are to verbalise each step with peer tutor feedback. This links directly to the observation that students did better when verbalising, and it gives a structured way to practice clear, patient-friendly explanations while being observed and coached. So let's now look more closely at assignment 3 and how learners performed. So assignment 3 moves into the lab workflow. So execute gram stain and PCR prep safely and in order, complete LIMS sample ID, and then explain the procedure results to a BMS. This explanation is the discriminator. So practical steps are usually correct and safe, and LIMS or ID entries are largely accurate and complete. The gap is the explain to BMS element. Many learners describe steps but don't interpret results, justify quality checks, or state implications for next actions. Minor documentation gaps also appear when narration is absent. Let's look at the last year's assignment task in a bit more detail and what we're looking for. So for a gram stain, the order matters. Fix, to stain series, to rinse and inspect, while controlling contamination and interpreting the field. For PCR, demonstrate pipetting accuracy, contamination controls, and cycle rationale. For LIMS or ID, complete all mandatory fields to maintain traceability. In the BMS explanation, hit 5 beats: purpose, to key steps, to quality checks, to interpretation, to next action. So assignment 3 was very strong technically. The greens are highest for the hands-on tasks and documentations. The mark spread is driven by the explain to BMS element. So for gram stain and PCR steps, the majority executed steps correctly and safely. Minor slips were rare and were mitigated when learners narrated what they were doing. LIMS and sample ID documentation was largely accurate, correct identifiers, forms completed, and records updated. For the explain procedure results to BMS, this is the differentiator. Top scripts explained the rationale, common pitfalls, and what the interim results meant for workflow. Weaker answers simply listed steps without interpretation or next step implication. So what to tighten? Require a 60-second explain like a new starter summary after each lab task, such as purpose, key steps, quality checks, interpretation, next action, and pair that with a LIMS sign-off box with a verbal narration habit during the practical to keep performance in the green. So to further support learners in assignment 3, we need more strategies that address both technical accuracy and reflective depth. First, we can use reflective prompts to strengthen evaluation, like what went well, what risks did I manage, and what would I do differently. Encourage learners to move beyond description and engage in meaningful reflection. Next, we should build academic integrity through short, focused activities, such as mini tasks on referencing. This reinforces the professional expectation that reports are not only technically correct, but also evidence-based and traceable. Third, peer Q&A sessions are powerful ways to rehearse professional discussion by questioning each other on processes. Learners practice justifying their decision, a skill that supports both assessment performance and workplace readiness. Finally, it is essential that written reports are closely linked to the learner's own data. When students use their own results, they're more invested, and it reduces the risk of copying generic responses. This ensures stronger authenticity and accuracy in documentation. So now let's look at assignment 4 and the performance across the 3 tasks. So assignment 4 is 4 scenarios or written tasks. They were maintenance of complex medical equipment, testing equipment calibration, so calculations interpretation, escalation of equipment issues, and research and innovation. Strengths, task 1 and task 4 are typically strong. Learners identify risks to staff patients, cite the right regulation, and when they work through all bullet points, handle research ethics well. In task 3, many outlined sensible escalation steps when the anchor actions to the scenario. Task 2, calibration, is the weakest. We see calculation errors, using individual values instead of the mean, incorrect deviation handling, including negatives, and thin links to patient scale or safety. In task 3, SOP referencing can be shallow or replaced by generic definitions. So let's look at the last series in a bit more detail. So in task 1, maintenance, expect hazards to staff patients, references to MDR 2017 or IRMER 2017, and clear plan if equipment is unfit for use. In task 2, calibration, define accuracy versus precision, calculate with the mean, handle negative deviations correctly, and explain what the results mean for patient care. In task 3, escalation, follow SLP step by step, perform ID traceability checks, decide when or how to escalate, and suggest preventative changes. For task 4, research and innovation, address every bullet point: HRA route, consent, feasibility, cost and benefit, and implementation. So let's explore the performance in a little bit more detail. So for task 1, the maintenance of complex medical equipment, students generally did well here. The stronger scripts identify risks to both staff and patients and link their actions to legislation. Gaps appeared where learners couldn't accurately describe how the X-ray machine operates or didn't explain what they do if a device was unfit for use. For task 2, testing equipment calibration, this was the weakest task. Many made mistakes in maths, using the 5 individual masses instead of the means, subtracting deviation the wrong way, or avoiding negative answers. Even when accuracy or precision were defined, learners didn't always relate them to the patient scale context or explain why correct calibration matters for patient care. This drives the larger amber red in the chart. For task 3, escalations of issues related to equipment, most students could outline sensible steps, and when they tied actions to the specifics of the scenario, for example, which identifiers to check on blood tubes before escalating, they scored well. However, reference to the SOPs were often missing or shallow, and a few responses drifted into general definitions instead of applying them. For task 4, research and innovation, this task was consistently strong. Learners who systematically addressed all 7 bullet points showed a sound understanding of the HRA approval process and considered the patient's perspective, such as costs, practicality, consent. Mark fell when the bullet points were skipped or the rationale lacked depth. Bottom line, all 4 show strong performance in task 1 and task 4, solid but variable in task 3, and clear development need in task 2 for calculating accuracy and contextual explanation. Focus teaching on the calibration maths and tying definitions to patient impact while keeping the structured approach that works so well in task 4. So to address the challenges in assignment 4, we need to target both knowledge gaps and high orders thinking. First, knowledge quizzes with applied scenarios can help learners move beyond recall and start connecting information to realistic context. This ensures that their knowledge isn't just memorized but actively used. Second, use past cases for justification practice. Give students opportunities to rehearse explaining the why behind their decisions. This encourages them to ground their reasoning in evidence and professional examples. Third, sharing model answers that show depth in reasoning is key. By making the thought process visible, we help learners understand not just the content but the structure and logic of a strong response. Fourthly, we should consistently encourage questioning and critical thinking. Building a culture where learners probe assumptions, challenge ideas, and ask what-if questions prepares them much better for professional discussions. And finally, initial or diagnostic assessment of students' math level and providing targeted intervention support from the beginning of the course, particularly in relation to algebraic manipulation and statistical measures. These strategies, when combined, should support learners in moving from descriptive responses into more analytical and justified discussions. So we'll now step back and look at the overall trends across assignments. This helps us see the bigger picture, the strengths that are consistently emerging, but also the persistent weaknesses that we need to address through teaching and support. So this slide puts together the cross-cutting themes that came out of the examiner and moderator reports. First, the strengths. So procedural competence is a real positive, whether it's physiological measurements in assignment 1, urine and glucose tested in assignment 2, or laboratory processes like gram stain and PCR in assignment 3. Learners were confident with the doing, Almost all met the minimum standard and many achieved distinction in the practical elements, so hands-on ability is not the problem. But we start to see ambers in areas when we look at communication and hygiene. Patient-centered communication is inconsistent. Some learners gave clear, reassuring explanations, checked privacy and comfort, and verbalized steps. Others used generic or rushed phrases and didn't adapt to patients with additional needs. Infection control was better than previous years, but still variable. Eyewear not always worn, equipment not always cleaned down properly, and glove use inconsistent. These amber areas show that technical skill is there, but the professional behaviours that wrap around the procedures still need reinforcement. The first red flag comes with math and data labelling. Repeatedly across assignment 2 and assignment 4, learners struggled with calculations. They used raw numbers instead of means, made errors and deviations, avoided negative answers, or plotted graphs incorrectly. More importantly, they rarely explained why the maths mattered, what it meant for patient safety or clinical reliability. This is a consistent weakness that costs marks and undermines higher order skills. The second big red theme is evaluation and reflection. Time and again, learners describe what they did without evaluating, how well it worked, or reflecting on what they improved. Extended responses stayed at a descriptive level, and marks were lost because evaluation was not attempted or because reflection did not go beyond "I need to do better next time." Very few used any models and reflective models such as Gibbs or Kolb, and this is the single biggest barrier to moving from amber into green. Documentation and SOP use is another amber theme. While most learners filled in limbs or prepared notes, references to SOPs were often missing or superficial. Some copied blocks of text or pasted tables into presentations instead of interpreting them, and top marks were reserved for those who justified their actions with references to standard operating procedures. On a more positive note, research and innovation was a strong area. In assignment 4, where learners had a structured list of bullet points, many performed very well. They demonstrated a good grasp of HRA approval, informed consent, and patient consideration. The difference was that the task was clearly scaffolded. Students knew exactly which points to cover. This shows that when we provide structure and prompts, learners can meet the expectations confidently. So to summarise, green, procedural competence is strong. Learners can do the tasks. Amber, communication, hygiene and documentation are inconsistent. They need embedding as non-negotiables. Reds are maths, evaluation and reflection. And green, again, is in the structured research tasks that show what that scaffolding really works. So the key message for providers is that we need to maintain the strength and practical skills, but now raise the level of thinking, embedding patient-centered behaviours, contextualising maths, and building evaluation and reflection into everyday teaching. So this table translates the examiner findings into teaching strategies. So this aim is to turn the recurring weaknesses into strengths by embedding them into daily practice. First, patient-centered communication. So this report shows that too many learners gave generic or unclear explanations and often failed to adapt for additional needs. The strategy here is to make communication part of the routine. Get learners to verbalise every step in practice, use role play where peers act as patients with different needs, and provide sentence starters or comfort check scripts. Peer feedback can also help them fine-tune tone and reassurance. Next, infection control and hygiene. Although performance improved from last year, lapses still occurring with PPE, eyewear and equipment clean down. The best way to tackle this is to make hygiene non-negotiable. Checklists on your benches, learners can take turns as peer assessors to monitor PPE use, and you can start and end every practical with a hygiene drill. Embedding reflection questions like what kind of contamination risk did I manage? Help learners understand the why as well as the what. Math and data handling is a red theme. So learners made frequent errors with means, deviations and graphs and didn't always explain why accuracy matters. Strategies need to focus on contextualised numeracy rather than abstract calculations, set tasks and calibration, glucose testing or deviation analysis. Teach a structured approach of setup, working, conclusion. Use error spotting exercises where learners find mistakes in worked examples and link it back to the patient. For example, what a miscalculation would mean for care or safety. Evaluation and reflection was consistently weak. Most responses were descriptive and lacked analysis of reliability or improvement. The teaching focus should be to make evaluation routine, to use the simple what, so what, now what model for after every lab. Require learners to write one specific CPD action with a timescale in each reflection. Show exemplar reflections at different bands so they can see what the higher level analysis looks like, and build in peer-paired reflection where one learner challenges the other to go beyond description. Finally, documentation and SOP use. While records were often correct, references to SOPs were missing or superficial. The strategy is to couple documentation with justification. Ask learners not just to complete the record, but to cite the relevant SOP clause. Give scenarios where SOPs drive the decision making and use peer assessment against SOP checklists. Encourage a docu-explain habit where learners record what they did and then explain why it matters. So overall, these strategies target the 5 biggest areas for development. They're about embedding communication, hygiene, maths, evaluation, and SOP referencing into everyday learning. If we can do that, we'll shift the amber and red RAG areas into green next series. So as we come to the end of today's session, I'd like to take a moment to reflect and share some practical ways that you can move forward. So support doesn't stop after today's session. There's a range of materials available to help you and your learners. On the NCFE qualification page, you'll find the Chief Exam Report, student exemplar work, and downloadable schemes of work with free teaching materials. There are also recorded CPD sessions on our YouTube playlist, which you can revisit anytime, and upcoming live events listed on the NCFE T-Level Training Events page. All of these are designed to make your delivery smoother and your learners more confident. Please complete the short survey to provide feedback on the NCFE Provider Development Event, T-Level Healthcare Science Year 2 Summer 2025 Chief Exam Report. We really appreciate your feedback on today's session. You can scan the QR code on the screen or follow the link in the description below this video to complete a very short survey. Your input helps us to refine our training and make sure future sessions are as relevant and as useful as possible. So thank you for engaging with this session on Chief Examiner and Moderator Insights for the Assisting Healthcare Science Occupational Specialism. These reports give us a clear lens into learning performance, where they succeed, where they struggle, and how we as educators can make the difference. By applying the strategies we've shared today, you can embed deeper reflection, strengthen technical fluency, and build the professional confidence your learners need. We look forward to continuing this journey with you as we support the next generation of healthcare science professionals.